Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Post-Apocalypse World. I am joined today by, over there, Nolan Jones from Roll20. Hey, Nolan, how you doing?
Howdy, I'm good.
So Nolan is going to be informing us about some cool new stuff coming for Roll20 in just a minute, but I'm going to make him sit quietly and listen to me talk about Apocalypse World for the first little bit.
I can do that. I'm okay with that.
You can keep your inner marauder silent for now.
I'm fine.
All right, Nolan witnessed me. So yeah, there was no apocalypse this week, which is always a nice thing to be able to say in your life. But yeah, instead we announced our new campaign, which of course, if you missed the announcement show, is the Burning Wheel, which is going to be starting up on Friday nights at 5. So unlike usually, where I have a bunch of stuff to talk about and we have some fronts to move around and I get to expand the weird zones, this week I just wanted to talk about, I've had a couple of people ask me about a very specific implementation of something I've been doing in the post-apocalypse world as it pertains to Roll20. So I just wanted to take a quick walk through, because I realized I hadn't done this. I had all this stuff set up before the show. I want to take a quick walk through how I set up what we're actually looking at on each screen. So with the map, for example, I actually have two maps. I have my my player-facing map, which is what you see here. This is the map we're all kind of familiar with. This is the one that the players use to figure out where they are and everything. And then I also have my GM version of that map, which you can see here, which is the full original map that I found online and have been using to kind of manage where things are. I've been cross-referencing this with Google Maps and with the help of some of the members of the audience, figuring out kind of like where in real life objects would be, so I can get some inspiration for what the the area around any given location might look like. So these two both use the same sort of tech in Roll20. I added these as graphics, so I've put them in my sort of tokens and maps area. So you can see up in the corner here, I've got my library and I've got access to the marketplace. And my library is where I've kept all of my all of my background stuff. You'll see some other things because I use this account for all of my campaigns for roleplay as well. You can see I've got some art in here from those. So this is where I store and tag all of these. There's my player picture for Dr. Grigori there. I've got some handouts here, which I'll look at in a second. And what I've done is I uploaded both versions of the map. You can see I've got Archipelago GM and Archipelago PC. And what I did was I created a new page up in the top. Right here, so these two pages, and in the properties I've just disabled the grid. I've changed the background scale, so this is something that's really cool, because players always ask like, oh, how far is it from here to here, and if you're using it generally looking at like a PNG or a JPEG or something, it's hard to kind of guess or eyeball. So this way, if we change the scale, so I've got 1 unit is 2 kilometers, I can just use the tool right here. I can use the ruler, so I can tell to get from Sentinel Point to Shaughnessy Peninsula is 19.5 kilometers. And much to the chagrin of the people I'm playing with, who are not either big sci-fi dorks or live in Canada, they don't like the kilometers. But that's okay. It makes more sense for me. Because the game is set in Canada and the GM is Canadian, so too bad for you, America.
At one point, I can't remember, I think that kilometers was the only thing that was measuring correctly, and had like the inches and the like did not work as far as measurements, so it's funny to see.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I actually initially had sort of discounted the idea of needing the ruler at all, because I was thinking, well, we're not using like a grid for the game, so like I don't need to know how many squares Navare's grenade launcher can fire. But then, yeah, doing the map and realizing that we can kind of figure that out actually it's a lot like easier.
That's one of those weird things. Like, I think more people use the ruler who don't use grids than who do, because they want to play with the, they want the lengths, but they don't want the lock, I guess, is the, which is, I don't know, it's the X-Wing miniatures way of doing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I thinking about it after we started doing this, like this is the kind of thing that is always so tedious in like a tabletop game. Like, I remember we were playing I don't know, probably 2nd edition D&D as kids, and having to like constantly break out a piece of string to measure the distance from like how far is it from along the road from Waterdeep to Neverwinter, and like measuring the string and then checking and then looking in the Dungeon Master's Guide to see how far you go. So being able to just draw the line has been really really useful. So for this map, those are the only two tools that I really use, right? Is the ruler and the map itself, which is on, of course, the map and background layer. And the reason I put it on the map and background layer is that on the other map, on my archipelago map here, I've got circles indicating the weird zones. I've got these little white squares and tags for each area that we've seen in the game, different colored circles. And all of that stuff exists on the objects and tokens layer, so that I can move it around without, messing up what's on my map. So these are things that obviously you're going to see repeated in other campaigns that we do as we develop the Burning Wheel campaign. As we're getting maps for that, I'll do much the same thing, so that way we'll be able to know where things are in relation to everything else, and keep that available both on the player side and the GM side, basically at all times. Now, the other thing that I've had a lot of people asking about is how to get the fronts stuff, the fronts interface into Roll20. So, when I was initially getting the GM stuff set up, I was like, okay, well, I have this sheet. Basically, it's a sheet in the real world that I would normally need to print and take to the table and have all these things organized that way. So maybe I need to get another character sheet added to the game. But I realized that actually just using the map layer and the objects layer, I can do much the same stuff. And in a lot of ways, I have a lot more flexibility than I would with a sort of more structured character sheet type of a layout. So in this case, I used each of these front screens uses basically just a screenshot. I went into Photoshop and cut the page out of the PDF, but obviously not everybody has Photoshop, so you can just take a full screen screenshot with your OS. And just like the maps, I put it in as a map in the library, dropped it in, and once it's here, if I switch over to the objects and tokens layer, I can do all the stuff that I normally would do on a piece of paper, like cross out names as I use them, or add characters to the map. And then you can see if I switch over to my my fronts, let's take a look at decay, because I think that has lots of stuff. Yeah, so you can see that I've got varying information of varying sizes on each page. Now, this is something that I really like about being able to use the interface as it is, because I have all these available, and unlike a piece of paper, if I want to change something, it's actually really easy, right? Like, I've changed these countdown clocks completely a bunch of times, and it was as simple as just selecting the thing I wanted to change and editing it as it stands. So I'm sort of a convert on these. Like, initially I thought it would be kind of a hassle to have to do it, but with a blank sheet in the background and just writing on top of it, it's just as easy for me as it is for for a piece of paper at the table. Now, the other thing that I did to prep for the game on the player side, and this is something that you don't really see very often in play, because we're all seeing like Navare's screen, we're seeing Avacyn's screen as we play. But for me, when I went in to do this, and I'm going to be doing the same thing again for the Burning Wheel game, because Burning Wheel has lots of like rules handouts and stuff. In the drop down in the middle here for handouts and characters, I've got obviously the character sheets for each character with their personal information. But I also have a basic moves handout, I have a peripheral moves handout, and the 2 MC moves handouts. So these, again, would be things that I would print off normally and have kind of in a stack or have nearby, but I can pop these up, and I can view them either in the window or I can pop them out. I usually keep them on my my second monitor while we're playing. And this way I can refer, rather than having to flip through the PDF, I can refer to the most common stuff in the game. And one thing that I like about using the handouts too is that instead of instead of the like the whole sheet in every instance, I can cut specific parts of the sheet out and just make those handouts. So if I need a particular table or I need a subset of a page without having to keep looking at the whole page, I can cut that out, and I can essentially use one of my monitors as a personalized GM screen, right? I can organize it in exactly the way that I want, and what's funny is that it's sort of made it's made this situation where the GM screen goes from being like a physical object to a literal screen, and we've kind of crossed over into that space. You know, if you're playing a game that uses a lot of rules, like we will be with Burning Wheel, this is the kind of thing that can save you a lot of time flipping through a PDF or, God forbid, a book at the table looking for something in particular that you have to keep referring to. So as far as kind of background stuff goes, that's pretty much what I'm doing with the you know, with the campaign. We have a couple of other screens that we use for maps to draw on, right? Like Jericho's Beach and Westridge both got their own map, which I'll keep in case we go back. I have my sort of basic screen where we keep the character portraits and you know, some inspirational art. One thing that I did want to do too, as I kind of went on, and I'll probably do it in a game that's got a longer run, is find art specifically for you know, certain locations within the game, and switch the players from location to location, so that, you know, when you're in the spooky castle, we've got the spooky castle background, and it sounds like one of those things that's not really a big deal, but it actually really helps set the tone because the players are sort of staring at that screen the whole time.
It sets the tone, but man, does it take a lot of work. Is
Yeah.
the other element of it too. Like Steve was doing that for Lost in Oz, and finding all of those right locations can be. I mean, I understand why you haven't jumped into that yet.
Totally, yeah. Well, because especially if you're like a picky GM, right? You want to get it exactly right and help set that tone. And it's interesting that we're in this medium where playing role-playing games online allows you to continue the sort of eluding detail thing where you can describe stuff, right? Because we have the advantage of voice communication, but you know, the advantage we have now is being able to have things like, you know, character portraits really easily available, and you can grab them while you're at the table, right? Like you're playing and you're like, okay, well, the characters are having a conversation. I know I need a picture for such and such NPC. You can look up pictures of actors or pictures from comic books, mix and match them, and people can get a better idea of kind of what your character looks like or what a location looks like. But like you said, Nolan, on the flip side, if you're the kind of GM that once you get started, you got to do it for everything. It's like, now you got to get ready to have NPC portraits for all your characters and all that stuff. So
that's what I was saying. We'd love to get more of that sort of thing on the marketplace too. Like there are some people who've done, you know, Kickstarters and the like that have, here are 50 NPCs with, you know, light backstory that you can mix and match for campaigns for those who aren't as creative and that sort of thing. That I drool at the idea of getting some of that content eventually.
Yeah, well, and it's a tricky thing because, like, I think that a lot of the time people think of, you know, portraits and stuff as primarily being used for games like Pathfinder or D&D, where it's like, well, I gotta have a token, right? Like, I gotta have something I can drag onto the map, which, yeah, you do. It's very helpful that way. But for stuff like this, it's also really useful to have, to have tone-setting pictures, and also you can organize them locationally, right? So if I have my background for the Swamp Palace, I can have, you know, the Swamp Queen and her manservant and her, you know, champion available on that screen already when we go over there.
It's even one of those, like, memory-wise, I think, you know, sitting at a table, there'd be times where DM's describing an NPC to me who was there, you know, 2 sessions ago, and it's like, who is that? What is that? But if there's a picture involved, or even, I mean, I remember there were characters on one of the games where GM would get out the token of the character. I'm like, oh, that guy.
This little elf right here. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that the difference there being that, like, in a tabletop environment, if you're playing face-to-face, there's that whole thing about, like, you know, you're playing D&D and you've got your new character and you got to go to the store or, like, whatever and buy a miniature that is, like, perfect for your character. And, like, you know, you can get close, and unless you want to design a character based on a mini, it can be a little frustrating to be like, well, okay, this is my character, except they don't have a shield, and, you know, it's not a spear, it's a halberd. And so you're still doing that kind of, like, that imagination dance. But if you're really lucky and you have access to, or you are someone who can draw, then you can just draw the characters, and you can put them in the game, and there they are. So, yeah, something that we're not seeing a ton of in Apocalypse World, just because, I mean, if you've been watching, there's really no point in me spending 2 hours looking for a picture of an NPC that Avacyn is just going to blow up by the end of the session. So, you know, it's like, well, I spent forever. Like, I found this perfect portrait. Here's what the character looks like, and then Avacyn's like, nope, that character looks like a pile of hamburger now. So, yeah. So yeah, just some small things that I've started doing for the Apocalypse World campaign. Things we're going to do more of when we get into to Burning Wheel. Just a couple of little things you can do to make your campaign run a little bit more smoothly on the GM side. Honestly, for me, changing the way I thought about the pages system from these are things the players look at to this is a way for me to organize all the stuff that would normally be on the table really helped me make that jump from thinking of Roll20 as a stand-in for the tabletop and more looking at it as a way to organize things that fits kind of the way my brain works with data a little better. So let me take us to, well, do you want to talk a little bit about the update first before we start looking at the fancy stuff?
We can look at let's. Sure. Yeah. Maybe.
Okay. Well, so what do we want to? What's happening? What's the update? Give us the update. Give us the nickel tour.
The nickel tour of the update. It is called the Interface Initiative. So for those who aren't aware and who have not been on this journey for as long as the rest of us have, we just came through our 3rd year of existence. The Kickstarter was April of 2012. So, and then this month or next month, we're going to pass the milestone of 1 million users. So that is also a big...
That is a lot of nerds.
That is a lot of nerds. That is a whole lot of... Well, it's crazy too, like seeing the population change over time from like people who were, oh, you're bringing our group back together, to now we have people who are first time. You know, I played World of Warcraft and I've always heard about this thing, but I've never gotten to try it. And so it's crazy that we're still growing at a level that like we have more people month over month, which is nuts. Like I never would have thought, like I thought eventually the cap of people coming in, new accounts per day, was going to get lower because we were going to hit a ceiling.
Right, because there's only so many nerds in the world. But...
Right, but apparently they're being converted day by day.
And these, like, I think I find these numbers really interesting because, you know, a lot of the time when like a company talks about like, oh, we have X amount of users or whatever, you're like, well, good for you, great. Yeah. Like, congratulations, but I don't really care. But in this case, that's 1 million people that you, people watching this right now, could go and play games with. Like, yeah. That's a real thing, and I love that about like the power of a social platform like Roll20 or any other social platform is that the more users you have, the more fun and interesting it becomes. Right?
I think one of the craziest things is that from an advertising standpoint, we have done very, 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 very little advertising for Roll20. So when there's 1,500 people, new accounts showing up every day, 1,500 brand new accounts every day. That's not, you know, an ad that's been placed somewhere. That is you as a player going to your friend and converting them into a player.
Well, it makes sense because that's how like tabletop games work too, right?
Yeah.
Is that if the GM loves the game and runs it with like passion, then the players want to run it too, and they'll tell their friends about this cool game they did. And it functions very much the same way. It's games and the things that are peripheral to games run very much on word of mouth.
That viral sort of sense that like we don't, it's one of those things like it's tough for us, the three of us that started this, to understand like, where did all these people come from? Like this was literally our solution for us.
Yeah.
Play tabletop games, and now, like I said, 1 million users is around the corner somewhere in the either this month or next month. I imagine that's going to happen as long as there aren't any weird fall offs. And usually that's not the case. Usually summer, there's a lot more gaming going on.
Yeah, but, well, with Gen Con coming up too, gaming is going to be on people's minds, I think. So
it's crazy what that does in terms of people. But at the same time, like Riley is really fond of saying, you know, an average weekend on Roll20 is larger than Gen Con now. Like
that's very true, and a strange thing to be able to say. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, in thinking about all this, so with updates, it's always this horrible fight over, you know, what do we need? What does this group of users need? What are the things that we haven't taken care of? What's the squeakiest wheel? And you know, folks fighting over what they want by what they think is important. And so the things that get dropped can often be very, very important things. And a thing we have dropped for 3 years and not picked up at all is our overall website. And it has been built on top of each other, on top of each other, on top of each other in a way that's weird. Like, I think the best example of this is if you go to the website right now and you click on logging in, and you see that there's a black bar along the top and a blue bar along the top, and there's things there repeating themselves.
Right.
Because, like, community forums, like all these things that have happened as a pure result of, doing this as we go. And having to like build on top of the resources that we put there. So it's like, oh, we need a wiki, and it's there, but it's a separate website integrated in an odd way, and so not everything is cohesive across the bars and that sort of stuff. So we have decided that our big 3-year update is that we are going kaboom and refashioning the website.
Yeah.
So we brought back in Dylan Todd, who did our logo. And sat down with him and worked on what would the overall image of the website be, better connected to our branding. And so this is the preview of that, with the old website melting away. Is the interface initiative. Dylan has done a lot with us. He does all the t-shirt stuff. He's done all sorts of concept work for us over the years that we've been doing this, but this was a really big, we started to roll out actually some of this across social media over the past couple months, because we actually did the work with him over early this year, across the winter. And so this has been a long process getting everything to where it needs to go. And now that we've kind of got the inspiration tools from him, it's us sitting down and sanding down the website and figuring out the areas that need change. And there's going to be a lot of things that do change. We're changing some of the naming conventions of the website to make it simpler. We're changing a lot in terms of where things are placed and how you can get to it. Just a whole lot of, if you want to switch to the next picture, I think we've got queued up.
Sure.
Somewhere there in the internet. Oh, raising hands. Questions are coming.
I think these are people who, when you said if you go to the website, immediately alt-tabbed and went to the website.
That's true. That could happen. But,
so this is so we're looking at the drop-down menu now.
Oh, well, and so that's something too, that instead of doing the basic bar that we've had, we're going to organize things in a way that makes a little bit more sense, and have drop-down menus so you can easily hop to the compendium, go pick up the new applications for Android and iPad and stuff like that, and doing things in terms of making it all a much more intelligent, intuitive experience in a way that, it just kind of building this frantically to keep up with the sudden people that we had on our hands has not done. So it's been a process, but it's been really cool so far, and it's fun too to see what everyone brings to the table in terms of their thoughts on what needs to happen, and making sure that the different voices in the process get heard.
Well, one thing that I find kind of cool about the way that the design has sort of been handled is that a lot of the time there's this sort of skeuomorphism of design where people are like, well, it's a tabletop simulator and we need to design it in a way that's going to say like Dungeons and Dragons to everybody. Yeah. So you get a lot of like kind of old Englishy looking fonts, and a D20 that looks like it's made out of stone or wood. And I quite like that the new design, the redesign, looking at it, it's very like sort of flat and modern, and like looks like an application.
That's
first.
One of those things, like I feel like we've gotten that right overall since the beginning, and that really, a lot of that goes to both Dylan Todd and Riley Dutton, in terms of Riley, didn't want, Riley as a web designer himself didn't want that sort of, it's one of those things that you can have something that looks good that very quickly looks outdated, by going down that hardcore fantasy route. And Dylan from day one was like, no, like we can, I want to design something that is fresh and modern and inviting and brings people in. And I think, from the very start as to what the logo is, there's something about it that pops. It really does say, this this is modern. This is
well, and I think one thing that we're seeing a lot of, you know, and I know that there's people in the audience, you know, who are here for this reason, but like I think we're seeing a lot of people coming into role-playing games that are not through the sort of usual traditional, like, I played Dungeons and Dragons when I was a kid, and this is what tabletop gaming feels like. We're starting to see more people come in through, you know, being exposed to role-playing in other venues, right? Like I saw Will Wheaton's Tabletop show, and I used to be into board games, and what are these about? You know, or people who are into like esports and see people like JP running shows. They come in through Misclicks, and they're like, this looks like fun. I want to do that, but you don't need to design for that kind of like, if it has to look like a D&D adventure to be able to, you know, to get people to be able to make the connection.
It makes you able to play so many more games without feeling like you're, I don't know, you have to make some sort of shift. It allows you to bring the aesthetics that you want to it, which is has been very, very important to us. As a matter of fact, if you want to flip to the next thing, we've got, so this is not the actual interface yet. This is not set up, but this is some of the design work that we got from Dylan in terms of when we went to him and said, you know, here's what we want to do with campaigns and that sort of thing. And so he went and jumped in and played with what was happening there. I see somebody asking in chat about language support going forward. And as I mentioned earlier, we're doing some changes in terms of our naming conventions and stuff like that. And actually a big reason for that is language support, which is ending up being a very large part of this website overhaul. One of the reasons that we wanted to overhaul the website was so that we could go and essentially, I forget the programming name, but essentially we're taking all of the text elements of the website, getting it in a list so that it's easily translated. And so by cleaning up our naming conventions, making certain that things are consistent. A great example of this is games versus campaigns. And we're trying to switch more towards being games everywhere. It's allowing the translation to go easier. But if you guys follow the Roll20 blog at all, you know that we brought on an intern this summer, Ryan, and the main thing he has been working on has been setting things up for translation. And I think at this point, Stephanie just gave me this number yesterday. I think there are 13 at least translators working on trying to get things ready for this new language stuff to go live with the website later this summer. So yes, is an answer to that question. I gotta pull from the chat the yes that I know I have, because there will be some no's as we go do this. But
yeah, and I think that's something that you know, obviously I don't have to struggle with personally, because English is my first language and is the primary language of the country I live in. But people forget, they get this sort of North American viewpoint of things where it's like, yeah, that's the easy audience to go after, but there are a lot of people who play role-playing games in, you know, Brazil and Spain and France and Germany.
Our website influx traffic dang near doubled for 2 weeks because a big-time YouTuber in France was using Roll20. And that's the sort of thing that we pay attention to. It makes a difference. But also, when we have everything in an organized, clean fashion, like we're moving to, it's not a huge thing. Like, we're not the ones translating it. All we have to do is clean up our act so that they are able to translate it. So it's a nice thing to be able to do and to get that organized. And it's really cool, the people that, you know, are volunteering and passionate enough to help us get this done.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, that's another thing too, towards making that step towards you know, having the tool be accessible to everybody, right? Is like being able to make language support easier. You know, the new design, just purely by looking at it, like without even looking at the code, you know, we can pretty much ascertain that it's going to be easier to manage for like screen readers. There's a lot that goes into doing this design, which is, like you said, Nolan, why, you know, it's been a while since we've done a big...
It's been forever. Like
it's literally been 100% of the time since we've done
which, you know, the website that we have built on it nicely. Riley would be defending himself if he was here right now. But at the same time, you know, it's been time, and we're glad to have the opportunity to do it. This is one of those things that, you know, it can't happen without there being, support and things going well, because otherwise we have to focus on exclusively subscription features. We wouldn't have time to do other things. But this is, there's enough people using dynamic lighting and using the API system and using all those things that we can go, well, we've got enough breathing room here that let's do something ambitious. Let's do something big. And so this is that big ambitious thing right now, the interface initiative.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. There's always something, right? Like,
yeah,
there's always going to be more things to add and to tweak and make better. And it feels to me like a lot of the choices that are getting made right now are based on like feedback from, like, we're not, in my mind, just doing like, we have a plan and not listening to the people that are using the software. It's about like you said, like the incoming analytics, like knowing where people are coming from, helping that to design the interface. Like, that feels to me like a really important part of the process.
Well, it's interesting, I think a large part of this for us is a result of coming from Kickstarter, which I'm certain is something that you can.
Yeah, I have some experience with that.
Yeah, and the way that your audience shapes you, and it makes you have to be receptive to feedback. But at the same time, too, it makes you your decision-making process is always towards your audience, but at the same time isn't necessarily a one-to-one ratio. So like right now, there's folks talking about, where can we put suggestions and things like that. We have a full suggestions forum, and we've done a really good job of knocking things out from there that are the highest voted, highest rated. These are things that we want right now. But at the same time, this was not something that was a high rated, we need this right now suggestion, because it's other squeaky wheels that people get used to navigating the website and getting through the problems that are there.
And it's funny, because I think that in a lot of ways, development, like software or web development, is a lot like game development, in that what that feedback really is just play testing, right? You're play testing a tool, because I mean that's all a game is anyway, is a tool for creating something. So you're play testing this tool and you get feedback, and the best kinds of feedback are, I'm having problems with this, or this is causing problems for me.
Yeah.
And then allowing the development team with their vision to apply what they already know about the software and apply the overarching plan to fix that problem. Often, and I've play tested games, I've play tested software before. Like, I know that the struggle is often to be like, this is how you should fix this, right? Like, I want it to be different in this way. But it's hard to have, both as a developer and as a user, to have the full picture of things. So that's always a struggle, regardless of what you're what you're developing.
It's a fight, but at the same time, I feel like as time goes on, we've gotten better and better about it, and started to understand how to solicit feedback and how to go. We have to do something a little bit differently than the feedback goes. But that is something that Kickstarter is an amazing boot camp.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. One, I think it keeps you humble too, right? Like if you start a company and you get $1 million from some like angel investor, it's very different than scraping together, your starting capital one fan at a time. It's a lot more community focused, I think, and it really kind of grounds you as a designer.
Yeah, no, it definitely it continues to have an effect in ways that are countless in terms of how we look at the program. Well, even things like just what we do with the development server now, in terms of having folks test things before we take it live to everybody, is because we want, some of it's to make certain that the code doesn't break anything, but some of it is truly, we just want that feedback that we've become accustomed to, that we want people to get their hands on it, play with it, figure out things that we weren't thinking about when it was just us.
Well, yeah, and I think that it's interesting seeing, like, I know for me, when we start this Burning Wheel campaign, like, I've got the sheet that we built, and it's amazing. There's tons of awesome stuff built into that sheet, but I know that we're going to get a lot of feedback from other people who are using it that'll help us tailor it even better, right? And being able to have that user base, to have people who are engaging with it in the same way that we are, that I think really, for me, really helps, like, knowing that, the thing doesn't have to be perfect out the gate, character sheet wise, because, we're all kind of invested in making it the best thing that we can.
That is an excellent segue to other elements of this update. We with the amount of things that we put out and the regularity at which we are releasing things, we often feel like there's like Steve, one of our developers, calls it a 10% issue, that there's 10% of a thing that we'd like to like, we get 90% of a thing done and it's excellent, but there's still 10% of it that we didn't quite get done before the release time. And so things that we are going to be working on in addition on this, we're going to be doing some more work on the mobile application side of things. So we're planning on doing some things there to make it easier to do macros on tablets, to make it easier to view journal content on tablets and things like that. I see somebody inquiring about phones. Phones are nowhere on the roadmap right now. We'd love to do maybe a dice rolling feature down the time, but we don't think that's not the experience we're going for currently. But tablet wise, we want to keep working on Roll20 for iPad and Android during this update period. 3D dice, we've got some things that we are working on there that are really cool. I'm not going to reveal all of them yet.
Yeah, can we talk about the 3D dice for a
Sure,
second?
yeah.
And what a, like, okay, so I think it's one of those things that, like, people see it as a bit of like a throwaway feature. They're like, okay, cool,
Sure.
whatever. It's like, fancy dice, whatever. Who cares?
Yeah.
But it is actually a big impact on play. Like, people get really tense about this imaginary set of dice. Like, when they roll and they're like up on one side, and you're like, come on, 6, and then they roll over and they're a 1, and just like, it's a big deal. And that interaction is one of those things that I think that people tend to assume they're going to lose when they switch from playing, you know, AFK to playing in the Roll20 interface. They're like, well, but what about the dice? The dice are so fun. But, like, it's still totally there. If you have the 3D dice turned on, like, I'm surprised at how much people engage with the tension of the die rolling. Like, it's kind of amazing.
Well, it's not, even before we had the 3D dice, I remember, like, what was it? The first roleplay series that was it Rhaegar's death, and the amount of people that were upset at the number of ones that were rolled there and things like that. And we're saying, you know, the dice engine doesn't work for Roll20. It's broken, and it only gives ones, and it kills people. Things like that have resulted in stuff like the quantum roller, so are absurd based on fluctuations of a quantum of light, random number generation system that you can actually go and look and see what the rolls are averaging out to in the day. And that, but yeah, we want to get the 3D dice to a higher point. The goal is to get it to a point where performance-wise, it's the default that it's on. And so,
well, I mean, dice, and the superstitions that surround such a thing are they're a big part of tabletop role playing. So, it's I guess in the grand scheme of things, like, it's not actually that much of a surprise that people would be invested in the idea of being able to watch the die roll around on the virtual table. But it does actually, like, if you have a Roll20 campaign and you have the the dice turned off, you should go and try turning them on. They're really fun, and just one of those, like, little features that you don't necessarily think would be a big deal, but end up being, like, pretty fun.
Yeah, no, it's a cool thing, and we know the importance of it and want to keep improving that. And then the final thing that we're trying to carry forward is continuing work on the compendium. There is going to be some more, hopefully non-Pathfinder content. We're going to get another OGL specific game up there in the months to come. Fingers crossed, as long as everything goes well.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for a game with, like, Creative Commons mechanics that you'd like to add to the compendium, I'm sure I could think of one.
I've heard of some. We'll see what all happens. I think there are 2 right now on the short list for things that we are hoping to have happen. One of them has somebody at the table that is pushing, and then there's another company that we're hoping to do some things with. That hopefully we'll have some more to tease out there. We will see a couple really cool publishers bringing content to Roll20 here over the summer before Gen Con. So we're really pleased to finally have that sort of movement. I remember last year Gen Con, there was definitely we were in grouchy mode at that point. It's like, we're big, why won't anybody work with us? And now,
you know, this is a thing, and I don't think it's so much. It's not even like any one company or anything that's not being taken seriously. There's still a lot of resistance. Like, if you imagine if you will, you work in the games industry and you make tabletop role playing games, and you're reliant for your business on selling PDFs that you assume people will either print out or read on their tablet at the table, and books, expensive hardcover books. And someone comes along and says, you don't even need those books, and we're going to integrate the character sheet into the thing. And like, you know, there's initially a lot of resistance to that idea because
it's an entirely different business plan.
Yeah, there's a way that you do role playing games, and this previously was not that. But I think in the last like year or so, you know, we've really seen not just fans, but people at large, like companies and organizations, start to take the idea of playing role-playing games online, because we have the technology available to us now, a lot more seriously. You know, and just the fact of the matter is that like Wizards of the Coast doing supported like live tabletop campaigns, the fact that Twitch has categories for Roll20 and for role-playing games, like I think that it's becoming finally in the games sort of game design industry, finally becoming something that people are taking seriously. And so we're going to start seeing companies incorporate, like I guarantee that within the next like 6 months or so, there's going to be a Kickstarter for a tabletop role-playing game that it'll either be a stretch goal or part of the Kickstarter that will say like, if we get this much money, we will develop an official character sheet for Roll20, right? Like it'll just be built in.
We've already seen it. As a matter of fact, there have been 2 Kickstarters. So Monty Cook Games did a Kickstarter that one of their stretch goals was Roll20 integration, hint towards things coming in the future. But in addition to that, Simple System is a game that was completely, I guess the bulk of the playtesting happened via Roll20.
Yeah.
And is out there and amongst us. I think we're going to see bigger and bigger groups doing that.
I think so too. Yeah. I mean, I that's the thing. Like, I think that what we're seeing now is the same thing we saw with, and my RPG, you know, historian stuff really doesn't go back that far, but I feel like White Wolf was kind of the first to really start pushing the PDF thing with character sheets. Like I remember still having to like buy AD&D character sheets, but being able to download a PDF of the like vampire or mage character sheet, and that was considered a pretty big deal. And I think we're in the next phase of that, where it's not just about having like a form fillable PDF, but being able to integrate directly with the tool to be able to manage all of that that stuff.
I think too, one of the things that's interesting to me is that I don't think the resistance has been necessarily towards the technology. I think there's definitely an element of that with the publishers, but I think a bigger element has been publishers were interested in this 5 years ago, and the technology wasn't there yet.
Yeah,
and so there were a lot of attempts to do this before it was viable, and I think that there are still a lot of publishers out there who are burned.
Yeah.
You know, they're
worried about. Look at Wizards' negative experience with any kind of online tool for basically forever, right? Like they even now, even the tool they were trying to do for 5e, that, you know, they struggled with that too.
Yeah. I think I will say I liked their 4th edition character builder a lot. I think that was something other than that it ran in Microsoft Silverlight.
Whatever, Silverlight is the technology of the future, Nolan.
Silverlight made sense as a decision for a company based in Seattle that was being, you know, it was in conversations with Microsoft.
That's true. Yeah, I mean,
I understand how that decision was made.
Yeah,
but that was the Achilles heel of that.
It was the Flash alternative before HTML5 was a thing.
But even, you know, stepping aside, goofing on that, it was a really great interface and something that a lot of parties who played 4th edition were very, very familiar with, and something that's cool and I think is very, very useful.
Yeah, and I think what we're going to end up seeing is, much like the rest of the tabletop gaming industry, we're going to see a platform in which smaller game designers can apply the skill required to make things for their games, and bigger companies are going to make bigger, fancier, flashier stuff. Yeah. But it's all going to be, like you said, underwritten by the technology that at this point is at a place where, like, I mean, I do 100% of my gaming on Roll20 now. Like, it's just the tool that I use, and there are a lot of ways in which I find it more effective than playing at the table, just because there's a lot of stuff you could do that you can't do or can't do as quickly or easily.
Well, it's what I say. I find, like, when I play in person that I want. I mean, one of the reasons that the character sheet elements exist, and particularly the tablet feature has come about, is playing in person and being like, this would be a lot easier if I had macros.
Yeah, I mean, that, like, the whole prerequisite for playing Burning Wheel as our next campaign was Steve and I sitting down and being like, okay, where can we make the rules easier, because we have the advantage of the character sheet being built in and doing some of that math for us. And I think that people that tune in for that show will will really be able to see ways that that we're kind of leveraging the game, the system Roll20, doing the game's math for us.
Yeah.
Because if you know anything about me, I'm terrible at math, and
I don't think you're terrible at math. You just you use all the tools. You like.
Well, no, yeah, it's like even basic math. I have to do it like slowly, and when you're like streaming and there's an audience and you got players waiting for you, it's nice to have a character sheet that now, if I want to make a swords test, I don't have to worry about factoring in all of the the health penalties or the obstacle penalties, and the game will tell me what kind of test it was after I roll. I think people are going to be really impressed when they see this.
I know I've said this to you, and I talk about it in interviews too much now, but the moment when you started the Mirror Shades campaign, and you tried rolling for the first time and you weren't using the macros for Roll20, and watching the Twitch chat revolt at that moment was a very comforting moment for us. In terms of real. There's so many things to take advantage here and so many different ways to utilize the system, and the more we have that out there and the more people are playing with that, and the better job that we do of documenting the features and helping folks get to the point where they can do these things.
Yeah.
It's really cool because it does speed it up and it makes it, so you can do the fun part instead of having to do the math.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Is that like there's nothing wrong with a mechanically complex system, right? Like we all, I think, have some degree as gamers. The game part is about optimizing your choices and like making a character that mechanically feels cool. Like it's great when you get to like pull off that awesome combo with your character, or you like get to use your once a day special power that does 500 d6 damage, because that's a part of the game, right? Role-playing game texts like to say, like, it's a role-playing game, you can't win, but you can, because having fun by engaging the mechanics is how you win at role-playing games.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed.
and I think that, like, for me, being able to boil a lot of that stuff down and all of the kind of, like, fiddly stuff, getting that out of the way, and just saying, like, okay, I'm going to use my cool power with my 500 d6, and I just click a button, and the system will reward me with the results right away. I feel like, from my personal experience of role-playing games, it's a big help, and it opens up the possibility for me to play games that I previously would have been like, sorry, Traveler, I don't really want to have to like, I don't really want to have to figure out, I don't want to have to figure out acceleration and deceleration in space at 0.1 Gs based on a thrust engine of like. I would just love to click Space Engine Go and have that be made available to me as a result, so I can narrate my way through it. And I think that's a way in which like you said, the technology is getting to a place where it's not about a skeuomorphic representation of an existing experience. It's about creating a new experience that's an iteration on what we've been doing, since 1977, which I think is super cool. And I'm like personally really excited about the ways. Like these kinds of changes and the ways that the software develops are impacting backwards, right? Where it's not just the games changing the way that the software works, but it's the software changing the way that the games are played and what games get played.
No, the more that becomes a relationship where both sides are impacting each other, the crazier things are going to get, the more interesting and dynamic things we're going to see. So
yeah, absolutely.
Do we want to do questions? Are there questions out in the world?
Yeah, I feel like we've had some as we've gone. Right? But yeah, if anybody has specific questions they would like to ask either me about any of the stuff that I'm doing, questions about Apocalypse World or Burning Wheel, my plans there, or you want to ask Nolan about the update, or you want to hassle him about any questions you've got about Roll20 in general. You're
It's
welcome
true.
to do so.
I will answer most of the questions.
Yeah, and then
All
the
the
ones you
questions
don't
I
answer,
can't.
you'll just be like, "Well, Riley says I can't answer this question." Richard says,
Right. It's funny. Like, we're such an odd brain trust, the three of us, in terms of like, I'm out here because Riley knows that I am the best at not answering the questions at times. So if you're going to Gen Con and you want to try to get answers out of us about things, come to our panels and direct them at Riley and see what you can do. But yeah, we'll see what's up.
Well, do you want to start with a question that you may not be able to answer?
Time frame for the update. Our hope is that everything is out before Gen Con. We usually try to get out there before that. Why this layout? It's kind of annoying.
Oh, that's just the layout of our faces.
Oh,
everything is very like left heavy. It's not your new layout.
No, I'll get into a fight with you about how pretty the Roll20 layout's looking right now.
Just because, I mean, we're using this one because it's the layout that we have for displaying web content, and
that
again,
makes
obviously
sense.
this is just a this is just a PNG. So,
well, PayPal.
Yes, do you want to answer the PayPal question?
Sure. PayPal, I don't know when it's going to happen. It's something that we know is important to the audience. It's something that we would like to do. I was actually talking about this with Adam previously, but before the stream. Like, PayPal is something it took Blizzard doing World of Warcraft 3 or 4 years to implement because their recurring subscription setup is terrible. So it's always out there, but it's not the immediate priority. I'll say it keeps on inching closer and closer up, but we haven't made that jump yet.
It's a tricky thing to manage because PayPal for straight up like I would like to buy this or I would like to donate money to you is fairly simple. That's why like every
singular transactions it's great.
Every web store on earth has those, but yeah, it's recurring payment system. If you're not regularly invoicing someone, is way more complicated to integrate. So yeah, like Nolan says, we're working on it. We use PayPal too, and won't want to be able to allow everybody to use it, but. Yeah, it's a question of time. I have an Apocalypse World question I want to answer.
You do.
So, so there's a question here about what I think of the extended playbooks in Apocalypse World and why I didn't propose them to the cast. So, for those of you who are not familiar, there are, on top of the playbooks that come with Apocalypse World, there are several additional books that came out over time, some fan creations like the Faceless, the Quarantine, the Maestro D. I didn't include them because they're really hit and miss. Some of them are awesome. Maestro D, super cool. Hoarder, not as good. So you know their quality is sort of up and down, and the folks that were playing, I wanted to keep it simple and straightforward. We wanted to play sort of core Apocalypse World. But what is interesting, if you're keeping up with 2nd edition Apocalypse World at all, the operator is being removed from the game and kind of like chopped up and incorporated into some of the other playbooks. Like the driver gets some of the operator's moves now, which is neat. And the Maestro D and the Quarantine are being included as core playbooks in the game. The Quarantine, I think, is particularly interesting because that character being included in the game very much makes the game about what was the world like before, what is it like now, and what is it going to be like, because the Quarantine is a relic of the past, right? You're the soldier in the cryopod that is, you're awakened and brought into the apocalypse. So it's an interesting change, and for us, we wanted to just play the game kind of by the core book as written with the simplest playbooks we had possible. But if we were to do another campaign of the game, I would do the same, but we would include obviously the Maestro D and the Quarantine, because those are now part of the sort of core experience that Vincent's created for the game. But yeah, also having the Quarantine pretty much just makes your game into Apocalypse World Fallout, which can be awesome or can also be not as awesome depending on how you handle it.
There's a fashion question.
I saw that. That's Aurath. I'm wearing a black t-shirt like I'm always wearing every time you're on my stream.
Like you are Michael Kors.
You know. Yeah.
How final is the design? I would say the design for what we're working on right now with the interface initiative is, I mean, we're still working on it, so it's obviously not 100% final, but we feel increasingly confident about it. I'll say, working with Dylan, so when we sat down and did this with him, we did a lot of things, and as I said, you can see right now in terms of what we've done with social media rollout recently, or even what we did here with Apocalypse World and with the Twitch stream, we were able to take what Dylan gave us, which are pages after pages. I mean, I have a 10-page document sitting in front of me that is just rules on how to use the logo. It's our graphic identity.
Having worked in advertising, 10 pages is nothing. 10 pages is like a lot. It's a lot if you think about, like, this is 10 pages. Like, if the audience could see it, this is literally 10 pages on what colors of pink and purple are acceptable, and if you're already using pink and purple somewhere, what the alternate colors are. So the inverse palette, what fonts, the size those fonts are, how to organize that text. 10 pages, we got off light with that. I've seen, like, 30, 40-page design docs, and they're, you know what, they're really interesting because they end up being a lot like, you know, you see these like design bibles for movies or TV shows, or like, you know, Blizzard has one for World of Warcraft where they're like, this is what an orc looks like, or how to draw thrall. They're important because, using the Warcraft example, if you don't adhere to them, if you don't have that stuff set up, you end up with things like that horrible adventure game where Deathwing looks like the caterpillar from Alice in Wonderland.
Well, it just makes such a difference too. I think, like, there's the negative side of what you're holding off, but two, the positive side of, like, oh, this feels like Roll20. Like, there's something to having a brand that works like that. Well, and two, it's nice that then you can take, so the job the brand has done with all the Twitch stuff, it's absolutely gorgeous, and it's one of those things that was nice to be able to hand to her. Here's what Dylan says all the world should look like, and she's like, okay, here's the world. It's a really nice thing to be able to do, and we've got that now at the website. Dylan said, hey, here's what I think the website should look like, and we're really comfortable with that image and think it ties in well to what we're doing. So I think a lot of it will be very, very similar to what you've seen today. And it's going very, very nicely. I think all of us are really pleased with how it looks and how it's moving as well.
So we probably have time for one more. And I actually, this is a question that came up last time that we were playing West Marches. So is there an option, or the plans for an option in the interface to change the font size for the like running tally on the side?
Not yet. I know that we've talked about fiddling with the fonts and things like that, but we are not doing anything in that interface place yet. I do have like 3 quickies here that I would love to knock out in any plans for a specific quantum roll stat page for your campaign? No, not at this time. Will there be 3D percentile dice? That is the plan. We are hoping to get that to happen. Related well into that, again, for those of you who might have missed, what is the release time for the update? We're hoping to have this all wrapped before Gen Con. If not, it will be right after Gen Con. And then we have some questions about recurring subscriptions and why we do it that way. It makes it a lot easier to plan and to pay people if you know what's coming in the future. I will say, if you don't want your subscription to recur, you can cancel it immediately. It does not cancel your benefits for the time frame that you've paid for. So, you know, don't feel bad about doing that. It's okay.
Cool. All right. So let's talk about where folks can learn more about Yon Roll20 if they want to keep up with these things.
Roll20.net is an excellent place. Our blog, blog.roll20.net, has that, which you can also follow via Tumblr. Our Twitter, which Stephanie, who's Avison, does an excellent job of keeping things up to date and moving there, is also a great place, at Roll20 app. So that would be the best places to hunt us down on the internet.
Cool. And yeah, if you want to, I mean, you can look on Twitch, you can look on YouTube for, there's lots of folks playing role-playing games. I am one of them. So if you want to see more Roll20 in action, every Thursday and Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific, we do Apocalypse World, and then I do a post show here on the Friday. We're going to be starting up a new slot next week at 5 p.m. Fridays. So 5 p.m. Pacific Fridays, that's going to be the kind of lead up to Burning Wheel. We're going to be starting that game officially on the 3rd of July. And if you are going to Gen Con and want to meet the Roll20 team in the flesh, we do exist. We're not just internet cyborgs. You can do that by attending our panel. So
we're trying to find other things throughout the weekend. I think Adam will be the easiest tracked there because I think he'll be also at a table.
Yes, yeah, that's the other thing too. If you just want to find me, if you don't care about Nolan,
Yeah,
Shame. Nolan's a fantastic guy. But if you just want to meet me, I mean, yeah, I'll be at Gen Con at the Burning Wheel booth basically the whole time.
If you want to find me, I'm 6'7", so you just walk around the floor of the convention, and the big head sticking up above all the other ones is usually mine.
Yeah, that's my favorite thing about, like, people don't know this because, you know, on a webcam we're all about the same size.
Yeah.
But if you go to a convention and you see us, I'm like 5'6".
Yeah.
And Nolan is very tall compared to me, especially. So I
am bizarrely tall.
Yeah, it's pretty entertaining. So yeah, if you're going to Gen Con, come and find us. I'm also going to be at PAX when that rolls around. But the best place to keep an eye on things is obviously the social media. So follow me at Skinny Ghost, follow Roll20, Roll20 app, and that's it for us for today. We will see you on Thursday for Apocalypse World, and in the meantime, I don't know, go play a role-playing game.
That's a good idea.
Cool. Thanks for coming, everybody.